If you're tuning into the live stream, the first story was cut off, so I'll be starting from the second story, and this is Quarantine Spook Show. Alright, this next story is called The Field of Deadly Daffodils. The sirens were loud that night. After attending a protest downtown, the police came down harder ever than what we were used to. What we were ready for. Though I don't like to admit it, but the most pertinent thing to do at that moment was to flee. They were firing tear gas even during a pandemic. Police cars were swarming all corners, set out to arrest every last protester that went out. Manage a hop a fence and leave downtown. Even the outskirts of that quadrant didn't feel safe. I had to find somewhere else. Luckily I knew of a passage that passed through residential neighborhoods. And then over a fence that would lead to a field outside the airport. I've cut across that area many times when I was growing up. But hopefully I could just cross that field and get to the other side and then maybe take a Lyft or a taxi home. Contact people I went to the protest with to see if they were safe. But in the meantime, I had to find some safety of my own. So that's precisely what I did. I hopped the fence and went into the field. But one thing that was new to me in this field, something I've never noticed before, was that it was full of daffodils. It was nighttime, but it was still clearly visible. Daffodils were as far as the eye could see, which wasn't too far in the dark, but still. hear the sounds of a highway nearby. I remembered that highway. There was a bridge that went over it, further down it. Back when I had a graveyard job near the airport, on airport property, technically. There was a warehouse there. I would go there and walk there from my house. It would be like 3 in the morning, and then when I reached the bridge, I would just have a cigarette and then smoke on it and just watch the few cars and trucks that'll go by. It was a very romantic experience for me at the time. But in this case, adrenaline was hitting me so high that I didn't quite feel that same romanticism. But I did feel that romanticism for the daffodils, the whole field of them. I even picked a few and took a bandana from my pocket and wrapped them up in my hand. Maybe if I ran into someone, I would give it to them, give it to a friend or something. So I was walking through this field, a little bit slower. I stopped hearing sirens. And if there were any daffodils that caught my eye, I would pick them as well. Eventually, as I reached the edge of the field, I started to get a little woozy. I felt like I was going to pass out, so at that moment, my first thought was just like, oh, don't tell me it's fucking COVID and getting me. After all this time, after being as cautious as I was. But then I thought maybe it was inhaling tear gas. The type of nerve damage it could cause, you know, maybe it was getting to me or something, getting to my head. But then I passed out. And I remember the dream I had. It started off with the same oddness of any dream I would have. In this one, I was an actor in a zombie movie. And I played a zombie, but I only had 3 lines to do. And I was thinking, I don't know why a zombie has to talk, but also it was a dream, so it's like, you know, I guess like dream logic is taking the reins in this sleeping experience. And I remember being paranoid that I didn't memorize my lines, because in reality I never did memorize them. If I remember correctly, it was all gobbledygook, abstract sentences, and all that. words that didn't really fit together to make any cognizant meaning to anyone who spoke my language of English. Or even the vast cultural intersections that can encounter it. But yeah, it was just dream babble, more or less. So I tried to recite these lines as I had a piece of paper next to me, trying to read them. And the director was sympathetic, but he wasn't really having it. Eventually the whole set went to do something else, and I had a hunch that would have been cut from the movie. It still didn't occur to me that there was a dream at all. So eventually, from this movie set, I'm just walking home. And I think, I'm going to take a shortcut through a field I know. And then through that field, what I notice is it's full of daffodils, which is something I've never noticed walking through this field, even though I've been familiar with it during the entire filming of this movie and this scene, even though I was only a burgeoning actor. So I think to myself, these daffodils are beautiful, you know? I mean, I'm always struck by lilies or roses when I walk by flower shops and whatnot. But there was something about these daffodils that were just so mesmerizing and so beautiful. So what I do is I start picking some daffodils, and I even use a page from the script I was referencing to fold it like a napkin so they can remain intact. So I spent some time in the field admiring it, and I felt a strange sense of deja vu. I was thinking I've been to this field before, but I've never seen these daffodils, but it feels like I've seen them before. But there's no tangible memory that I could connect this sense of deja vu with. So after I spend like 20 minutes just lazing about in the field, I start to leave. And right when I get to its edge, when I get closer to the street, I pass out. And then everything goes dark and foggy. And then when I wake up in my room. I walk out to the fog. It was foggy. It was always foggy in the mornings when I would wake up as a windmill maintenance worker. The windmill that I worked at was right on the edge of a cliff overlooking the sea. Uncanny, I've lived at this windmill, near it, caretaking for it, as my father did before me. I always wondered why I never left this small town. Never going out to see cities. Never to pursue a more extravagant trade, like something in show business. But then when I enter the windmill and then look out the window at the ocean, I just think, nah, this is too beautiful to miss out on, even for a second. Everything profound I can encounter in life can just be encountered right here. So I was staying in the windmill, trying to carve a doll out of wood. I've gotten better at molding humanoid figures. But this time I thought I'd try to carve a goat like my neighbor had. And I've gotten close to it before, but I could never get those horns right. But then as I'm looking at the figure, I'm just like, nah, this isn't quite right. And I look at the knife and I'm just like, oh, that's why. This is a dull knife, I should get a new one, I guess. And I thought about putting it on my infinite to-do list. Once I put something on it, usually it doesn't happen for another few weeks or even a few months. But I was itching to go for a walk, so I thought, you know what, I'll just go to the store and get it. It's just in the other town that I know of. The next town over sells some great knives and whatnot, so I guess I can go there. And I felt paranoid about leaving the windmill unattended, even for a brief moment. But I thought, no, this will be fine. It'll be fine. Felt strange on the walk from the windmill. I don't know why I felt at such unease, I locked it and everything. I told my neighbor there, like, hey, if anything happens at the windmill, let me know when I get back, if anyone tries to break in or something, I want to know about that thing. But I made all the usual precautions to make sure the windmill would be intact, even if it was for an hour, which was so rarely that anything disastrous happened. So on the walk, usually what I would usually do is I would just walk alongside the main road that connects our towns, but I thought instead I'd take a bit of a shortcut, cut through some trees, a field, and then some more trees, and eventually I'll be in the next town. So I go through the woods, admiring its beauty and all that, watching some of the birds, watching their movements, the way they turn their necks, the way they chirp, the way they court each other by trying to fly down and swoop and get as close to the ground as possible, and then challenging others to test their feet. So past the trees, I enter the field. But then I noticed something that I've never noticed before, that the whole field was covered in dandelions. I think I was just in this field last week, on a date, so I don't know why these flowers would grow so quickly, so vast. And I think, oh, well, me and my date did have a good time out in this field last week, playing some mandolin and flute, jamming out forest style. So I thought, oh, maybe if I can bring her to the field, I can at least pick some dandelions and give them to her as a gift, So what I do is I bend down to pick some dandelions, and I stop myself and think, wait, I've done this before. It was like I felt deja vu, but it was a much heavier and darker feeling. Like I've done this exact same thing before, multiple times, at least 3. But certainly as many as 1,000. So I stopped myself from picking the dandelions. So I go to leave the field, but it's tempting. I still want to pick some, but it still feels like a very bad idea. Like I'd be caving into this dark impulse to self-sabotage. A dark impulse to self-sabotage. To repeat the same deeds over and over again. And not learning from them because I keep forgetting they happened. I don't know why I had this thought. Maybe living by the windmill and the cliffside and the ocean gave me the space to think about these types of thoughts. But I just think, no, I don't think I should pick these daffodils. So eventually I go to the next town, leaving the daffodils intact, even getting paranoid to walk on them. Then I go to the store and I get a new knife that I can use for carving and whatnot, and also for kitchenware if I chose to. And as I head back to the main road, into the date that I went to the field with. And she's just like, oh, hey. And I'm just like, oh, hi, how's it going? She's just like, yeah, good. I got something for you. And I was just like, for me, really? And she said, yeah, check this out. So from behind her back, she pulls out some daffodils that she plucked. And then gave them right to me. And I laugh and say, oh, that's so sweet. I was gonna give you the same gift, She was just like, very serendipitous, And then she said, well, why didn't you? And I was just like, well, I don't know, but I guess I still have some time to do so, I suppose. Maybe I can surprise you with it or something. And she laughs and I laugh, and then we try to rendezvous for hanging out in a few days, and then we part ways. So I'm walking down the main road, back to the town I've lived to all my life. thinking about the daffodils in my hand, thinking about the field full of daffodils. And then I go about my day, the windmill maintenance, I have a big dinner, I have some duck and mashed potatoes. And then as I'm going to sleep, I'm laying in my bed. I have the daffodils on the night table beside me. And then for some reason, wanting a sense of comfort, I just grab the daffodils and fold them into a little napkin and then hold them against my chest as I start to fall asleep. And then as I pass out, my last thought to myself is, this doesn't feel real. Alright, this next story is called iPhone 2 Vengeance. Everyone was frantic at the Apple company when Steve Jobs died. I mean, the insiders knew that he didn't do a lot of the real legwork. He was more of an idea guy, But also he was the face of the company. It's just like, oh, look at me. I'm so, we got iPhones and neat mobile devices and all that jazz. But when Steve Jobs died, the Apple company had a bit of an identity crisis, you might call it. I mean, they still made computers, they still made mobile devices, they still participated in data mining. But the sleek effect of their brand was at stake. It was getting to the point where people called it frivolous, unnecessary, inconvenient. just a lesser Microsoft, and insults of that sort. So a lot of the higher-ups of Apple, tried to restructure the brand, tried to pitch a lot of things. Some even tried to cultivate a sleek persona like Steve Jobs did, trying to do the whole black shirt and sneakers thing, As much as that style did infiltrate the tech community, admittedly, no one quite pulled it off like Steve Jobs. So as people scrambled at Apple, it was the same type of hysteria that people would search for Willy Wonka's golden ticket. There must be a way to keep Apple on the map and make them bigger than ever. And then there was one coder who was newer to the company. He would think about it. But everyone tried to emulate what was done before. Everyone trying to be quote-unquote cool like Steve Jobs. Or to be like the Facebook timeline and try to integrate technology into people's lives. But this young coder had other ideas. So he spent long nights, lots of energy drinks, trying to solve the same equation that other people at Apple did, but at a different angle. So when he felt like he had the right idea, he tried to convince his boss, he tried to convince his boss's boss, he tried to convince his boss to have a meeting with the executives. So this young coder, with his Apple laptop in hand, came into the executive office. And the executives was just like, alright, got any ideas for us to keep Apple sleek and relevant and hip and all that? God forbid we just focus on quality. We just want people to need us. That's our whole gimmick. So how can you do that? And the young coder, smirking to himself, just kind of thought, well, if you want people to need you, all you have to do is offer vengeance. And then the executives of the company, just turned their heads in a similar stuffy way, even though they wore t-shirts and sneakers, they still had the same corporate stuffiness that any sort of corporation can have. And one of them just said, offer vengeance? And the young coder said, yes, that's right. You see, my idea is to come up with a new version of the iPhone called the iPhone 2 Vengeance Edition. See, unlike other products Apple has released in the past, this device can offer vengeance. If someone has a grievance at work, or a grievance in their social group, or even a grievance with society, this iPhone can cast vengeance against the target that they choose. executive says, well, how would that work? And the coder said, well, all you'd have to do is just insert the target, and then things would happen. And an executive asked, well, what kind of things? And the coder just said, things would happen. And one executive just kind of started hysterically laughing. He was known as the more smug person in the company. And he was just like, oh, that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard. Offering vengeance? Come on. We may do, tech companies may do data mining and mass surveillance, but vengeance? That's a bit silly. That's a bit too far past the mark, don't you think? Then another nicer executive, well, how does it work? So then the young coder just looked at the smug executive and then pulled out his iPhone 2, which he already had a prototype of. Just a modification of his current iPhone. And he just said, well, this is a prototype, but let me just insert some stuff. And he was just like, alright. And then he put his phone in his back pocket. And then just waited. And everyone in the company was just kind of waiting, shrugging their shoulders, like a speech that ends prematurely. They're just kind of just like waiting and whatnot. And then the smug executive spoke out again. He was just like, well, aren't things supposed to happen now, like you said? And then suddenly the door bursts open, and a pack of hungry wolves rush in, and then attack the smug executive, tearing at his clothes, at his flesh, eventually devouring him, all of his organs. Barely recognizable. Needless to say that it would be a closed casket funeral. The other executives freak out because there are a bunch of wolves in here. And they're just like, oh my god, oh my god. And then the young coder says, don't worry, nothing will happen to you. None of you are targets. And then one of the executives was like, oh my god, what'd you do to him? How'd you get these wolves? And then the young coder said, well, I just typed in some things on my iPhone 2, and then things happened. And then one of the more rational executives was just like, all right, I think you should leave. This is a bit too dangerous. We're not really in this racket on this side of the ocean, so I don't think we want any part of this. And then the young coder laughs, chuckles to himself, and he's just like, oh, don't worry. Nothing will happen to you. Yet. You see, my prototype is operational. So I can set the iPhone 2 against anyone I choose. Doesn't matter if we're on this side of the Pacific Ocean. You all know this is on par with the company. This isn't too far from Foxconn and all that jazz. However, I wouldn't set a target on you if you had the same ability to do that to me. But I still think this is a great idea. I mean, isn't that what you want from a smartphone company like this? You just want to make things happen for people. And then the other executives were just thinking about it. It was just like, yeah, well, we do want things to happen for people. We want them to need us. And who doesn't need vengeance? So after a long discussion about the morals and ethics of the company, they agree. They decide to build and distribute the iPhone 2 Vengeance Edition. It starts off like any Apple release. It's always the diehards that wait in line in tents outside of Apple stores waiting for the next product. And even though that was more newsworthy after the iPod came out and versions of the iPod were in swing, and the early versions of the smartphones, now everyone knows that the people who wait outside Apple stores and tents are just kind of like fanatic weirdos, which, you know, God bless them, you know. If you're passionate about something, then, you know, go for it, unless it's evil, but, you know. But what does hit the news is when these Apple diehards get the technology, and then they make things happen. Sometimes it's wolves. Sometimes it's anvils. Sometimes it's hitmen. Any multitude of spontaneous disasters can occur against targets. But then other people with older versions of smartphones from Apple, and people who weren't even Apple enthusiasts, started to catch wind of the services that iPhone 2 Vengeance Edition can provide. So eventually, you know, everyone gets an iPhone 2. And since the iPhone 2 can make things happen, no one wants to be devoid of the ability to make things happen. So they get these smartphones even if it's beyond their means and beyond their necessity. God forbid that you weren't the only one with an iPhone 2. Because if you didn't have one, then people can make things happen to you without any retaliation. See, you can make a setting on the phone so that if someone does things to you, you can reciprocate. It wasn't always effective, though. There were several years where it changed the course of society, where political leaders were much more short-lived because people would frivolously set a target on their phone to just make things happen to them. It was the highest rate of political assassinations in human history, even by wolves and by anvils, rabies, all kinds of things. All the kind of deaths, shark attacks, all the kind of deaths you thought were rare became much more heightened. That young coder became the next big tech icon, you know, like a Steve Jobs or a Mark Zuckerberg or whatever. He actually made it his slogan. I make things happen. And things did happen. A lot of people died. A lot of people became more in shape because they had to flee from cougars all day because so many people wanted vengeance against them. A lot of people cried out about how there's no legal repercussions about these vengeance things happening. How it's just like, oh, if you don't plot a thing on your phone for a pack of wolves to attack someone, how come you're not charged for it? And then legal officials would say, oh, well, we wouldn't want things to happen to us, but if you don't like it, just make things happen to them. And eventually the iPhone 2 Vengeance Edition started a new form of criminal justice. It was no longer in the hands of governments or anything like that, but it was in the hands of the people. How if they wanted vengeance on a whim, then they got it quickly and efficiently. Some people who tried to stop this system of criminal justice, this vengeance whimsy that people were taking advantage of within themselves. They tried to curate wolves that repopulated in the wild to stop the vengeance, but if it wasn't wolves, it was cougars. If it wasn't cougars, it was car accidents. If it wasn't car accidents, it was just lightning being struck from the sky. So one day, the young coder, who is now middle-aged, was looking out his window in San Francisco, watching the city, thinking about how within the 20 years since he released the iPhone 2 Vengeance Edition, society completely restructured itself. Just like Facebook did before it, or even earlier versions of Apple, or Microsoft, or any big tech company. Google, any company that's big enough to impact everyone. And that's what the iPhone 2 Vengeance Edition did. He never told anyone how the technology worked. He didn't let anyone see how he coded it. Kept the scripts encrypted. Even his peers in the company had no clue. They only knew how to reproduce it, and maybe to improve on it. Eventually died, not telling anyone his secrets. How he managed to gain the ability to summon wolves on command, or to create freak accidents on a whim. Ironically, he died from a pack of wolves devouring him. Apparently, someone wanted vengeance upon him, and he had no way to curb it. He was remembered in the written history of communication technology from that century. And a lot of people and activists try to eradicate the technology from society so that people didn't have the ability to summon vengeance on a whim and to use it recklessly. but eventually the use of frequent vengeance became normalized. Lifespans shrunk because of it. It made a lot of people more well-behaved, but it made them far from better. Because if even someone put on a pleasant front, they can still set a target on their iPhone 2 without anyone knowing it. So, after all these years, after the death of that coder who came up with the idea of the iPhone 2 Vengeance Edition, the executives of Apple were all sitting together and had the same plight that they had after Steve Jobs died. You know, since the death of this coder, they had to rebrand themselves in some way to recalibrate their relevancy. So then one of them just simply said, "So what can we do for the iPhone 3? This last story is called Cherry Bomb. It was a tough prank to pull off, but I think I nailed it. It took a lot of endurance on my part, but I think I pulled it off. What I did was, I had several cherry bombs. So I had some friends of mine, which I call associates. We set ourselves up at every public bathroom available in this small middle school. And then when they were cued and ready to light those puppies off, I was at the office, ready with the intercom. Right when I played the song Cherry Bomb by the Runaways, they lit cherry bombs and let them off in the toilets, and then they exploded. In some cases, it screwed around with the plumbing. In some cases, it damaged toilets. But as the school was flooding and people were freaking out, it was to the song Cherry Bomb. And it provoked the same hysteria that it would as if you were playing in the house the song from 28 Days Later during the first wave of the pandemic shopping hysteria. Very unnerving, very upsetting. But at the time, I just sat in the principal's office desk, put my heels on the top, and just started laughing. But of course it wasn't a prank that I knew it was a prank that I couldn't get away with. But I was ready for it. Luckily my associates were able to get away. I didn't want them to go to juvie or anything like that. But I accepted the punishment because I wanted the credit. I wanted to be the one to be known as the mastermind who set off cherry bombs all around this middle school to the song Cherry Bomb. They talked about different punishments, but I knew the loophole. Since I wasn't the one that set off the cherry bombs, they couldn't send me to juvenile hall or anything like that. They could only suspend me at best, because the only thing they could prove was that I got on the intercom. But that wasn't enough for an expulsion for a first-time offense. And it's not like this middle school's policy really captured conspiracies, you know. And I felt like a champion about it. I wish I had a cigar that I could smoke. I wasn't old enough to get access to cigars really, but still. Sometimes if I could break into my parents' room and get a cigar, I'd be lucky. One of my dad's cigars, you know. But I could never smoke a whole one, but I would never tell anyone else that. I would just say, yeah, I totally smoke cigars, whatever. It definitely took a lot of strife in trying to be badass and cool, which is what this middle school needed, personally. It's like a Disney Channel movie when someone kicks ass in middle school, except my version is rated R, because I don't fuck around. Now this principal was really stressed out, even though this was my first offense of the school year. He knew I was a bit of a trouble student. A problem child, if you will. And he knew he couldn't expel me or anything, though he desperately wanted to. So I get sent to his office for punishment and whatnot. And he's giving me a hardcore reprimand like I've never seen. I was almost impressed. But it certainly was enough to tame my wild spirit. And then he was talking so long and so loudly, he was out of breath, and he said, go wait in the foyer lobby area. I'll figure out what to do with you. So I go in, I sit in the waiting area. I take out a lollipop and start sucking on it like an old school greaser. Even though we weren't allowed to carry our own candy, which was the cherry on top. No pun intended. And I could overhear him in the office. It was the first time I've ever heard a teacher or a principal curse. And he just said, I don't know what the fuck to do with this kid. And he was saying this to his principal's assistant. So the assistant said, very darkly, why don't you give him in-school suspension in 2A? And the principal doesn't say anything. He just says, alright, he just opens the door and he says, alright, you can come back in. So I go and sit in front of his desk, waiting for my suspension or whatever, whatever he could throw at me, I was ready for it. I read the rule book. I knew what I could and could not get persecuted for at such a young, innocent age. And he said, alright, so since we can't prove you set off those cherry bombs into toilets, and your alibi was breaking another rule, we're only gonna put you in trouble with that rule. And all we can really do is send you for in-school suspension. You'll just be spending one day on a Friday. Instead of going to your classes, you're just gonna be in a little room and we're gonna watch over you. You can do homework or whatever, but yeah, it's just gonna be in-school suspension there. And I said, but principal, isn't that counterintuitive to the education system? I mean, in the 80s, in-school suspension was like on a weekend or something, so the punishment was that you'd have to take time out of your personal life to endure a punishment. But if you just pull me out of class, that compromises any sort of education you're bestowing on us. It's no wonder that so many people from the school district graduates illiterate, If you just pull them out of class, how are they going to learn anything? So the principal, understanding this critique, and probably agreeing with it to some level, he just chuckles and says, oh, you'll learn something. And I didn't know what he meant at the time, but Friday came and I was ready for my in-school suspension. I had some comics that I could read, some homework to do, I was a straight A student, believe it or not. It's just, I work hard and I play hard. It's kind of hard to critique someone's lifestyle when they're succeeding. Lesson for the rest of you kids out there. So I went in, and surprisingly, I was the only student who had in-school suspension that day. So it was just me and a teacher that I didn't recognize. I think she taught a few grades below me. I was in 7th grade, and she was I think she taught 5th grade, but I think she was a new teacher. I don't think she was around when I was in 5th grade, so that's why I didn't recognize her. So I go in, I sit at one of the desks they have there, and she looks around. It's such an empty room. No chalkboard, no posters. Even other classrooms had like let's read kind of posters, but this one was just like blank and desolate. Not unlike an interrogation room or a prison, which I hear a lot of in-school suspension rooms are like that. So she looks around, and then she says, more to herself, I guess that's everyone. So eventually she takes a key and then starts to leave the room. And I say, wait, what are you doing? And then she says, oh, I'm not staying in here. This place is haunted. And then she leaves the room and locks the door. And I just think, haunted? understanding of in-school suspensions, you know, you're not allowed to read or do homework. You just have to sit in the banality of the silence that's imposed upon you. So I'm just like, alright, fuck it, I'm just gonna read, you know, Evil Ernie or whatever, you know? So I'm sitting in this room alone. And it starts off as pretty quiet, you know? I don't think too much of it. And then I could have sworn I heard a voice in the desk behind me. And I jump and it startles me, and I turn around and no one's there. And I think, oh, that's bizarre. So I go back to reading my Evil Ernie comic. And it's talking about one of the many iterations of his origin story. Where, like, he's psychic, and he has a best friend who's like his smiley face pin, who's also kind of evil. And then he falls in love with death, so he tries to make the planet extinct to impress her. Pretty cool stuff, I thought. I also heard that there's this arc where there's a crossover with Alice Cooper, which I totally have to read at some point. So, eventually, waiting a bit, you know, I just think, oh, I guess this is gonna be an all-day thing, you know. Glad I got plenty to read, you know, plenty to do. So eventually I get a little bit sick of reading, and I just stand up, walk around, pace back and forth. And I'm just like, nah, I'm cool with solitude. It's just like that, you know, that episode of Recess when the protagonist is stuck in solitary confinement, which is a really weird prison metaphor in a kid's show, but even still, I can totally handle this, I thought. So, I get an idea, and I look at the chalkboard that's blank, and I see some chalk. And I was just like, I don't know, I'll just draw stuff, I guess. Leave something for the next kids, you know, if they don't erase it. There are some ghosts of other drawings on the chalkboard, you know, old sketches, old doodles. I think I could have sworn I saw like one caricature of a teacher nobody likes. So eventually I'm just like drawing random shit. And then I get bored from that, so I'm just like, alright, maybe I can do like some homework or something. So as I'm doing my math homework, I'm showing my work on the chalkboard. Like, yeah, this is cool, you know. And I just recopy showing my work on the worksheet because, you know, you gotta show your work for those math classes. But then I notice on the chalkboard that all the spots where I drew the chalk, it starts to bleed off the chalkboard. And I just think, oh, but chalkboards don't bleed, which is a very simplistic thought to have at the moment, but it was such a shock that I couldn't really summon anything else more profound or intellectual or anything. It's just like, oh, seeing a chalkboard bleed, it's just like, oh, but they don't bleed. But there's a deep-seated fear from witnessing it. So I'm just like, oh no, I don't know if I can handle this, I'm getting out of here. So I try to open the door to leave, and I'm just like, shit, it's locked. It won't budge open. Eventually the lights go off, and then flicker back on, rhythmically. It goes on, and then off again. On, off, on, off. As this continues to happen, I try to shake the door open, and I try to bust it open, but my weak little 7th grade arms don't do the trick. And I'm just like, shit, I gotta go to the gym when I'm old enough for that to be beneficial to my body. Damn it. So I try to ram at it, try to open it. Try to go through the teacher's test that's in there. Try to pull out some sort of tool that can help me pick the lock or something. But the chalkboard keeps bleeding behind me and starts oozing on the floor, and eventually I step in it. So I try to go to the door, and I try to pry it open with like a screwdriver that I found. Then I try a paperclip that I try to wedge into the lock. But I'm just like, shit, I did not look up enough YouTube tutorials for how to pick locks. It's really something I gotta do. And I'm just like, wait, shit. So I pull out my phone and try to look up a tutorial. YouTube is banned from the Wi-Fi network of the school. Maybe I can find some other tutorial site where I can look that up. They can't block everything, which is a noteworthy censorship principle. Trying to look up videos, but then my phone dies. After swearing I had a full battery, but I just thought, no, this is the work of something else. The lights keep flickering, the chalkboard keeps bleeding, and I try to just shake the door. Not out of the efficiency of trying to pry it open, but I just start to cry, and I just scream, let me out, let me out, let me out. I can't see what's outside the door, so I don't know if anyone can hear me. But then I hear the bell ring, and then other students walking in and out. So the hall's full, so I just start screaming, let me out, let me out. I get some of their attention, but none of them actually pay enough attention to actually try to help me out of the room. They just like, oh, who's screaming in there? And I just scream, let me out, let me out. Eventually I feel a cold chill down my spine, like there's something else in the room with me. And then I screamed the loudest I've ever screamed in my life. Let me out, let me out. No one in the hall takes note. And they all get to their class and just remain silent again. It's not like those teen dramas where people spend an endless amount of time chatting in the hallway. It's just like 3 to 5 minutes and then it's over. 7 tops, you know. Screaming, you know. And eventually I strain my throat so I can't scream anymore. So I only let out a silent hiss from my throat. And then eventually, after giving up, I turn around and see the presence itself. It's just a cloaked figure with a sullen gray face. It has a lot of wrinkles and they're all stretched further than human emotion can convey. And it terrifies me and I try to scream, but nothing comes out of my mouth. So I just sink down against the door to the floor and just start sobbing. eventually I wake up. And then the principal opened the door. I apparently crashed. I fell asleep at the foot of the door. My face was still wet from all the tears I cried. So the principal gave me a very solemn look, and he just said, "Well, did you learn anything?" I nod and I wipe my nose and my eyes, and I just say, yeah, I did. And he's just like, okay, good. Because I thought you blowing up those toilets was pretty funny. I mean, with cherry bomb and all, like, between you and me, that was some good shit. But it's not about me. If I were you, I wouldn't anger the forces in this school. So if you ever want to try out an intricate prank like that, you better try it out somewhere else. So I nodded and understood. So we both walked down the hallway together. And he's just like, hey, you can have, if you want, you can have, like, lunch in the principal's office or something, you know, something cool like that. So I accept his offer, you know, and the principal's assistant in there, and so is a gym coach, you know. The gym coach is talking about how, like, his son listens to Porcupine Tree, and how, like, Porcupine Tree is, like, the next Pink Floyd, which I didn't realize it at the time, but that's kind of the thing a gym coach would say, I guess. So I'm eating some leftover pizza from the school lunch that was sold that day, and just hanging out with the principals and the gym coach. And then the gym coach says, hey, have you ever heard that Runaways album that Cherry Bomb's on all the way through? And I'm just like, no. And he's just like, oh, it's a bomb, you gotta check it out. So eventually he just starts playing the album. And I realized what I thought was a punishment of encountering me with ghosts and whatnot. It was really an initiation of witnessing of all the horrors that the school had to offer, which I thought was experiencing as a student. But really the true horror comes from working at this middle school. Besides the existential thoughts of working on the staff and reflecting on your own school experiences and being all like, shit, now I'm doing the announcements, now I'm serving detentions after not liking them. Now I realize that these paranormal experiences weren't easy to cope with. So if they encountered someone else who also witnessed them and lived to tell the tale, that they can accept them as their own. And then, as I got older, I would always think back to that experience. But I could never listen to Cherry Bomb the same way again. And that was Quarantine Spook Show. I'm Kerezsi, and good night.